December 10th, 2015. Petrolina, Pernambuco State, Brazil. The evangelical school of Petrolina, known for its high educational standards, was filled with children's joyful voices, music, and a festive atmosphere. The school was celebrating the end of the academic year. Parents gathered to watch their children perform, and teachers proudly observed their students. Among the students was 7-year-old Beatriz Mota, a cheerful girl with a bright smile and kind eyes. Beatriz came to the celebration with her parents, Luciana and Sergio Mota. The Mota family was respected in Petrolina. Luciana worked as a civil servant and Sergio was a government official. They were proud of their daughter, who demonstrated outstanding academic abilities and was loved by her classmates. The school festival proceeded according to the usual script. Children showcased their talents, singing, dancing, and performing theatrical skits. Beatriz was also scheduled to perform with her class. After her performance, she remained with her parents. Around 9 o'clock, Beatriz asked her mother's permission to go to the bathroom. Luciana let her daughter go, not knowing she would never see her alive again. About 15 to 20 minutes passed, but Beatriz didn't return. Luciana began to worry and went looking for her daughter. She checked the bathroom, asked Beatriz's classmates, but no one had seen the girl. With each passing minute, the anxiety grew. The girl's father joined the search, followed by teachers and other parents. They searched classrooms, corridors, sports grounds, all to no avail. Beatriz seemed to have vanished into thin air. At 10 o'clock, the school administration decided to call the police. The celebration was interrupted, and everyone present was questioned about whether they had seen Beatriz and in which direction she might have gone. No one could imagine that something horrible had happened on the school grounds, full of people, during a festive event. The search continued for several hours. Police officers methodically examined the entire school territory, interviewed witnesses, and checked surveillance cameras. Closer to midnight, one of the officers decided to check an unused school gymnasium, a facility that had long been out of service and was closed to students. Opening the door and shining a flashlight, the police officer saw a small body on the floor. It was Beatriz. The initial examination showed that the girl had received several wounds to the chest area. It was obvious that the child was dead. News of the terrible discovery instantly reached the parents. Luciana Mota's scream upon learning of her daughter's death was heard by everyone present. Sergio Mota, Beatriz's father, couldn't believe what had happened. In an instant, the festive evening turned into the worst nightmare for the Mota family. The school grounds were cordoned off by police. All those present were asked to stay for questioning. Criminologists, forensic experts, and prosecutors arrived at the scene. Painstaking work began to collect evidence. The preliminary conclusion of the medical examiners confirmed that death resulted from multiple wounds. Based on the nature of the wounds, specialists suggested that a knife with a long blade had been used. Establishing the exact time of death was difficult, but experts preliminarily indicated a time frame between 9 and 10 o'clock, precisely when the girl had asked her mother's permission to go to the bathroom. News of the tragedy at the evangelical school of Petrolina quickly spread throughout the city, and then throughout Brazil. The brutal murder of a child within the walls of an educational institution shocked the public. People couldn't understand how such a thing could happen in a school full of people during a festive event. The school, which should have been a safe place for children, became the scene of a horrific crime. The day after the tragedy, a special investigative team was formed. The investigation was led by an experienced detective from the civil police of Pernambuco State. The investigators faced a difficult task: to find a killer who committed a crime in a crowded school where hundreds of potential witnesses were present. First, everyone who attended the school celebration was questioned: teachers, technical staff, parents, students. Investigators tried to reconstruct the chronology of events, find out who last saw Beatriz, who might have been near the unused gymnasium. Checking surveillance camera footage didn't yield significant results. As it turned out, the cameras didn't cover the area near the unused gymnasium, and there was no surveillance system in the facility itself. This substantially complicated the investigators' work. When examining the crime scene, forensic experts discovered several important clues: blood traces, fingerprints, fabric fibers. However, the main problem was that the crime scene wasn't properly isolated in the first hours after the body's discovery. Many people, police officers, medics, school staff, entered the premises, potentially compromising the integrity of the evidence. Investigators considered several versions of what happened. The first version, the murder was committed by a school employee or one of the parents present at the celebration. The second, an outsider infiltrated the school. The third, the crime was committed by a teenager, possibly a high school student. Each version had its weaknesses, but investigators methodically checked all possible scenarios. Special attention was paid to checking the alibis of all adult men who were at the school that evening. School employees, parents, invited guests were checked. Each had to explain where they were between 9 and 10 o'clock. In parallel, laboratory tests of evidence collected at the crime scene were conducted. However, the process was slow due to bureaucratic delays and limited resources of forensic laboratories in Pernambuco State. The first weeks of the investigation didn't bring significant results. Investigators collected a huge amount of testimony but couldn't track down the killer. The public began to express dissatisfaction with the police work, and the Beatriz family felt that justice was slipping away with each passing day. The shock of losing their beloved daughter was replaced by Luciana and Sergio Lier Mota's determination to achieve justice. They couldn't accept that their child's killer remained free while the investigation stalled. The Mota family began their own struggle, a fight for truth and punishment of the guilty. Luciana Mota, despite deep grief, showed incredible strength of spirit. She began studying case materials, meeting with police officers, prosecutors, and journalists. Sergio Lier supported his wife in all her initiatives. Together, they founded the Justice for Beatriz movement, Justiça por Beatriz, which quickly attracted public attention. Social networks became a powerful tool in their fight. The movement's Facebook page gained thousands of followers in a short time. People from all over Brazil expressed support for the family and demanded that the investigation be accelerated. The hashtag #Justiça por Beatriz became popular in the Brazilian segment of Twitter. Luciana gave interviews to all interested media, appeared on television, and participated in radio programs. She talked about her daughter, about what she was like, kind, smart, curious, and each time called on the authorities to do everything possible to catch the killer. The Mota family organized peaceful demonstrations in Petrolina, drawing attention to the case. Hundreds of people took to the streets with portraits of Beatriz and posters demanding justice. The social movement grew, but the official investigation seemed to be going nowhere. Several months after the tragedy, Luciana and Sergio Lier Mota faced their first serious disappointments. They discovered that many pieces of evidence had been collected with violations of procedural norms. Some potential witnesses hadn't been properly questioned, and versions that the family thought promising didn't receive due attention from investigators. "We realized that if we just wait for results from the police, we'll never know the truth," Luciana said in one interview. "So we decided to fight ourselves. Not for revenge, but for justice, so that Beatriz's memory lives on, so that her death wasn't in vain, so that other children are safe." Their struggle was long and difficult. They faced the indifference of officials, bureaucratic obstacles, and threats. But Beatriz's parents didn't give up. Their Justice for Beatriz movement became a symbol of the fight against injustice and impunity in Brazil. A year after the tragedy, the investigation into Beatriz Mota's murder hadn't progressed. The initial investigative team was disbanded, and the case was transferred to other detectives. New investigators were starting practically from scratch, studying collected materials and trying to find missed clues. The leadership of the Pernambuco police changed, and new approaches, a fresh look at the case, were promised. However, this didn't bring substantial results. Criticism of police work from the public and media grew. Experts pointed to numerous mistakes and omissions in the investigation. One of the main problems was the improper preservation of evidence from the crime scene. Since the place where the body was found wasn't properly isolated in the first hours, many potentially important clues were destroyed or contaminated. This significantly complicated the work of forensic experts and reduced the chances of identifying the criminal by DNA or other physical evidence. Suspects appeared and disappeared. First one, then another person came into the focus of investigators' attention, but each time it turned out there wasn't enough evidence of their involvement. Some suspects had alibis. Others didn't match the criminal profile compiled by criminal psychologists. By December 2017, 2 years after the murder, the investigation had officially reached a dead end. The Pernambuco police admitted they couldn't identify the killer despite all efforts made. The case remained open, but active investigation was effectively suspended. This triggered a new wave of public outrage. The Justice for Beatriz movement, led by the girl's parents, organized a massive protest in Petrolina. Thousands of people took to the streets, demanding the resumption of active investigation and the involvement of federal resources. Luciana Mota, in her speech at the rally, said, "2 years have passed, and my daughter's killer is still free. He may be walking the same streets as we are. He may be seeing our protests and laughing at the police's helplessness, but I promise I won't give up until justice prevails." By 2019, after 4 years of fruitless investigation at the state level, it became obvious that federal authorities needed to intervene. The Beatriz family, supported by the social movement and some politicians, began a campaign to transfer the case to the federal police of Brazil. The process was complex and lengthy. There were legal obstacles to transferring the case to the federal level since murder was considered a crime falling under state jurisdiction. Special grounds were required for the federal police to take the investigation under their control. Luciana and Sergio Lear Mota met with senators, deputies, ministers, trying to gain their support. They collected over 100,000 signatures on a petition to transfer the case to federal authorities. The Justice for Beatriz movement organized protest actions not only in Petrolina but also in Brazil's capital, Brasilia. The media played a significant role in this struggle. Journalists conducted their own investigations, revealed mistakes made by the state police, and drew attention to the case at the national level. Documentary films and series of reports appeared, dedicated to Beatriz's murder and her family's fight for justice. In 2021, after a long legal battle and under public pressure, it was decided to transfer the case to the federal police of Brazil. This was a significant victory for the Mota family and all who supported their struggle. "This isn't the end of the road, but only its beginning," said Luciana Mota to journalists after the announcement of the case transfer. "But now we have hope. Hope that federal investigators will be able to do what the state police couldn't: find my daughter's killer." The federal police of Brazil had greater resources, better forensic laboratories, and more experienced investigators. For the investigation of this high-profile case, which by that time had become a symbol of the fight for justice in Brazil, a special unit was formed. The federal police began the investigation with a clean slate. All previously collected materials were thoroughly reviewed, analyzed, and systematized. Investigators discovered numerous omissions in the work of the state police, unexplored versions, and unquestioned witnesses. Special attention was paid to forensic evidence. The federal police had more modern technologies and methodologies, which allowed a fresh look at the collected evidence. Repeated studies of DNA materials, fingerprints, and clothing fibers found at the crime scene were conducted. Investigators re-interviewed key witnesses, teachers, parents, students who were present at the school celebration on the day of the murder. Some details previously overlooked now came to light. Special attention was paid to those who might have seen Beatriz after she asked permission to go to the bathroom. One of the new directions of the investigation was checking all persons who had access to the school territory, including technical staff, security, and temporary workers. Their biographies, possible criminal connections, behavior before and after the murder were checked. In parallel, work was carried out to create a psychological profile of the killer. Forensic experts analyzed the nature of the crime, the characteristics of the wounds, the choice of place and time of attack. This allowed narrowing the circle of suspects and focusing on individuals who matched certain behavioral characteristics. By the end of 2021, investigators had their first serious leads. DNA analysis conducted in federal police laboratories using the latest technologies made it possible to identify genetic material that could belong to the criminal. This information became key for further investigation. Luciana and Sergio Lear Mota were in constant contact with federal investigators. They regularly received information about the progress of the investigation, although many details weren't disclosed to them for reasons of secrecy. But even limited information gave hope that justice would finally prevail. "After so many years of disappointment, we finally see light at the end of the tunnel," Luciana said in one interview. "Federal investigators are doing what should have been done from the very beginning. They're leaving no stone unturned, checking every detail. And I believe they'll find my daughter's killer." The year 2022 became a turning point in the investigation of the Beatriz Mota case. Federal investigators studying the case materials and conducting new examinations discovered previously unnoticed evidence pointing to a specific suspect. He turned out to be Marcello Ranieri, who on the day of the murder was working as a temporary employee at the school, helping to organize the celebration. Repeated DNA analysis found on Beatriz's clothing with high probability pointed to Ranieri. Additionally, investigators established that the suspect didn't have a solid alibi for the time of the murder. In his initial testimony, he claimed he was in another part of the school, but new witness statements refuted this version. Additional evidence was obtained after analyzing Marcello Ranieri's phone conversations and his social media activity. It turned out that after the murder, he suddenly changed his behavior, deleted social media accounts, changed his phone number, and even moved to another city. Ranieri's psychological profile also matched the criminal profile compiled by experts. They discovered his tendency toward violence, problems with anger control, and his past revealed episodes of animal cruelty, a known precursor to more serious crimes. As evidence accumulated, investigators began to lean toward the version that Ranieri wasn't acting alone. Analysis of the crime scene and the nature of the wounds indicated the possible participation of at least one more person. Several of Ranieri's acquaintances, who were also present at the school celebration that fateful day, came into the police's field of vision. In early 2023, investigators had gathered enough evidence to request arrest warrants for Marcello Ranieri and several of his alleged accomplices. The federal judge, after reviewing the presented evidence, issued the warrants. Luciana and Sergio Lier Mota were informed about the upcoming arrests. After 7.5 years of struggle, justice was finally beginning to prevail. But Beatriz's parents understood that the arrest of suspects was just the beginning of a lengthy legal process, and there was still a long way to go until the court's final verdict. In June 2023, special operations to detain suspects in the murder of Beatriz Mota were conducted simultaneously in several Brazilian cities. Marcello Ranieri was arrested in the city of Fortaleza, where he had been hiding in recent years. 2 more suspects were detained in Petrolina and São Paulo. News of the arrests instantly spread throughout the country. For many Brazilians following the Beatriz case, it became a symbol that even after years, justice can prevail. Thousands of people expressed support for the Mota family on social networks, and a spontaneous march took place in Petrolina in memory of Beatriz and in honor of the progress in the investigation. The press conference organized by the federal police after the detentions gathered dozens of journalists from all over Brazil. The head of the investigative team talked about the key evidence that led to identifying the suspects, but many details of the investigation remained classified until the trial began. This is the result of painstaking work by our investigators, forensic experts, and analysts, said the federal police representative. But it's also the result of the tireless struggle of the Beatriz family and public support that didn't allow this case to be forgotten. The trial in the case of Beatriz Mota's murder began in late 2023 and attracted unprecedented attention from the public and media. Given the public resonance of the case, special security measures were taken. Enhanced security of the court building, thorough checking of all those present, limited press access. Marcello Ranieri and his 2 alleged accomplices were officially charged with the premeditated murder of a minor with particular cruelty. All 3 denied their guilt, insisting that the evidence against them was either fabricated or misinterpreted. The prosecution presented to the court an impressive volume of evidence. Results of DNA analyses, witness testimonies, surveillance camera records, analysis of phone conversations, psychological characteristics of the accused. Special attention was paid to the motive for the crime, which still remained not fully clear. According to the prosecution's version, Ranieri's primary motive was sexual, although the investigation found no signs of violence against Beatriz. It was assumed that the girl accidentally discovered Ranieri in the unused gymnasium when he was engaged in something illegal, and he killed her, so she couldn't tell anyone about it. The defense of the accused was built on undermining trust in the collected evidence. Lawyers pointed to violations in the procedure of collecting evidence at the initial stage of the investigation, to potential contamination of DNA materials, to the unreliability of some witness testimonies. They insisted that their clients had become scapegoats after years of fruitless investigation. During the trial, dozens of witnesses were questioned. Teachers and school employees, parents and students present at the celebration, forensic experts, and psychologists. Some witnesses recalled details that hadn't previously appeared in the case materials, which complicated the work of both the prosecution and the defense. Particularly emotional was Luciana Mota's testimony in court. She talked about her daughter, about what she was like, kind, smart, cheerful. She described the last moments spent with her at the school celebration and shared what the family had gone through over these years, from the grief of loss to the fight for justice. "Today, I speak not only as a mother who lost her daughter," said Luciana, addressing the court. "I speak on behalf of all parents in Brazil who want their children to be safe, who want such a tragedy to never happen again." The trial continued for several months. As it progressed, it became increasingly evident that the evidence against Marcelo Ranieri and his accomplices was very convincing. Particularly important were the results of new DNA analyses conducted using modern technologies that weren't available to investigators at the initial stage of the investigation. The Beatriz Mota case, beyond its immediate legal significance, had a profound impact on Brazilian society and legislation. The tragedy and the subsequent years-long struggle of the family for justice led to a number of important changes in the system of child protection and investigation of crimes against minors. In 2021, even before the arrests of suspects, a law known as the Beatriz Mota Law was passed in Pernambuco state. It toughened penalties for crimes against children and adolescents and established new safety standards for educational institutions. The law prescribed the presence of surveillance cameras in all schools, strict control of access to educational institutions, and special staff training on security issues. The Evangelical School of Petrolina, where the tragedy occurred, underwent significant changes. The unused gymnasium, which became the scene of the murder, was demolished, and a memorial garden in memory of Beatriz was created in its place. The school implemented unprecedented security measures, becoming in this respect a model for other educational institutions in Brazil. Luciana and Sergio Lear Mota established the Beatriz Foundation, which deals with issues of protecting children from violence. The foundation conducts educational programs, provides psychological support to children who have suffered from violence in families, and lobbies for legislative changes at the federal level. "We couldn't protect our daughter," Luciana said in one interview. "But through the foundation, we strive to protect thousands of other children so that parents don't experience the same grief as we did." The Justice for Beatriz movement, which began as a local initiative of parents, grew into a national movement against violence towards children. It united thousands of activists across Brazil, drew attention to child safety issues, and became a symbol of civic activity and persistence. In early 2024, the court delivered its verdict in the case of Beatriz Mota's murder. Marcelo Ranieri was found guilty of murder with particular cruelty and sentenced to 30 years of imprisonment, the maximum term provided by Brazilian legislation. His two accomplices received shorter terms, 24 and 18 years respectively, for complicity in the crime. The verdict was met with relief by the Beatriz family and thousands of people who followed the trial. However, the lawyers of those convicted immediately announced their intention to appeal the court's decision, which meant that the legal battle was not yet over. "This isn't the end of the road," said Luciana Mota after the verdict was announced, "but it's an important step towards justice. We'll continue to fight, no matter how long it takes." Despite the verdict, many questions remain unanswered. The motive for the murder wasn't fully clarified during the trial. Marcelo Ranieri never admitted his guilt and didn't explain why he committed this terrible crime against an innocent child. The Beatriz Mota case became a symbol of both a tragic failure of the child protection system and the power of parental love and social solidarity. It showed how ordinary people can fight against injustice and achieve changes that seemed impossible. Today, if you visit Petrolina and enter the memorial garden on the territory of the Evangelical School, you'll see a beautiful statue of a little girl with a book in her hands. This is a monument to Beatriz Mota, whose life was so cruelly cut short, but whose legacy continues to live. Every day, people come to the monument, leaving flowers, toys, notes, school children, their parents, tourists, passers-by. Many of them never personally knew Beatriz, but her story touched their hearts. Luciana and Sergio Lear Mota continue their work through their daughter's foundation. They speak at conferences, meet with politicians, support other families who have lost children due to violence. Their fight for justice for Beatriz has grown into a broader mission to create a world where every child can feel safe. Sometimes I feel that Beatriz is next to me, Luciana once confessed. And in these moments, I promise her that I will never stop fighting, not only for her, but for all children who need protection. This is a promise I intend to keep. The story of Beatriz Mota and her family's struggle for justice remains unfinished, but it has already become a powerful reminder that even in the darkest situations, the light of truth can ultimately prevail, and that the memory of an innocent victim can become a catalyst for positive changes in society. The case of Beatriz Mota drew attention not only to a specific crime, but also to broader systemic problems in ensuring children's safety in educational institutions. This case made many reflect on how security is organized in schools, who has access to school territories, and how effective existing mechanisms for protecting children are. One of the main lessons of this tragedy was the understanding of the need for a comprehensive approach to safety in schools. It's not enough to just install surveillance cameras or hire guards. Systematic work is required to check personnel, train employees to recognize potential threats, and create clear protocols for actions in emergency situations. Another important lesson is the need for immediate and professional reaction of law enforcement agencies to crimes against children. Initial mistakes in the investigation of the Beatriz Mota case, insufficient preparation of investigators, lack of necessary technical means. All this led to a years-long delay in achieving justice. The tragedy also highlighted the importance of civic activity and public control. It was the persistence of the Mota family and the support of thousands of ordinary Brazilians that ultimately led to the case being transferred to federal authorities and a breakthrough in the investigation. This shows that even individual citizens, by uniting, can influence the work of the state system and achieve positive changes. Although Beatriz's killers were convicted, the fight for justice and children's safety continues. The Beatriz Foundation, created by her parents, annually holds events in memory of the girl and to draw attention to the problems of violence against children. On Beatriz's birthday, December 10th, schools throughout Brazil conduct lessons dedicated to safety issues and protecting children from violence. Many schools organize special events where children learn how to recognize dangerous situations and whom to turn to for help. The Beatriz Mota law, initially adopted only in Pernambuco state, has become a model for similar legislation in other regions of Brazil. The movement for the adoption of similar measures at the federal level continues to gain strength. The story of Beatriz Mota and her family's struggle for justice has become an integral part of public consciousness in Brazil. It reminds us that behind every statistic of crimes against children stand real lives, real families, real pain, and that only by joining efforts, parents, schools, law enforcement agencies, society as a whole, can we create a world in which children will be truly protected. Ultimately, this is a story not only about tragedy, but also about the power of the human spirit, about unwavering parental love that knows no bounds, about how pain and suffering can be transformed into a force capable of changing society for the better. And although Beatriz is no longer with us, her memory continues to live, inspiring thousands of people to fight for a safer world for all children. Perhaps this is the greatest justice that can be achieved in the face of such an irreparable loss.